Hi everyone, my name is Ishan Kaushal. Just to do a very quick intro, most of you may know me from my TikTok account by the same name, where I go over anime, mainly Chainsawman, for media, symbolism, and just dissecting content through different lenses, whether it's theological, legal, or different ways of interpreting media. And I wanted to make my first YouTube video actually a viewer suggested video of going over all the volume covers of Chainsaw Man and kind of analyzing some of the things that we can see within the series about foreshadowing, symbolism, color theory, imagery, things like that. Without further ado, let's go with the volume cover that started it all, and that is Volume 1. There's actually not too much to say about the first cover of Chainsaw Man. I think the volume cover is also serving a marketing role of trying to get people interested within the series, but we do need to remember that for Fujimoto, Chainsaw Man is his first truly serialized pieces of work. While Fire Punch is arguably one of the things that put Fujimoto on the map in the manga industry, Chainsaw Man really put him in the Shonen Jump world and put him in the more mainstream consumption of anime, especially in the era after COVID, where it seems like anime is now one of the biggest things globally, especially in the United States. Competing with things like JJK, Chainsaw Man Volume 1 had to really entice the viewer, entice anime audiences of walking through a Barnes & Nobles or a manga store and say, why do I want to pick this up? So honestly, Denji emerging from the zombie devil, I think is a great nod to his birth as the Chainsaw Man within the first volume, but also the birth of the series of him kind of rising amongst these corpses, honestly maybe symbolic of some of the other mangas that feel like they've been dragging on for a while and really ushering in the new era of the new gen anime. Volume 2 is actually very interesting to me because of the decision to put Power on it. We do see Power's flashback and her whole relationship with Miaoi in this volume, but I do think it's honestly a great nod to Fujimoto as a writer because Fujimoto is no stranger to strong women in his work. Fujimoto's female cast, especially within Chainsaw Man, but in all of his work, has always kind of shined above some of the male characters, and that's not an accident. I think having Power, who oftentimes breaks the mold of a lot of female characters within manga and anime because of the fact that she's not really written at times to fit the male gaze, right? She smells really bad, she's really crass, like she doesn't even have feelings for any of the characters. She's kind of like in her own lane and stuff, and I've always liked that about Power, and having her be the featured character of Volume 2 I think is just really perfect to kind of cement the direction that the story goes in with its female characters, whether for good or also for bad. Volume 3 is when we start to see a little bit more of the subtext within the story start to flesh out, and I think having Himeno in Volume 3, which is also the volume that she does die in, does pick up the trend of the series of, you know, a lot of these characters are not going to survive. I mean, Volume 2 with Power, and now Volume 3 with Himeno. I think one thing about the Himeno cover that's actually very interesting is the fact that it's one of the only covers where the main character on the volume cover isn't actually looking at the audience. Himeno is looking to the side and her other eye is covered by her eye patch. It's kind of like she knows not to confront the reader, also because Himeno is not exactly the most popular character within the fan base, especially with the anime adaptation with Himeno's arc. It actually does a pretty good job of showing the gravity of her sacrifice because of the ghost devil's selfishness, but I do think her looking away is a great nod to kind of the more controversial aspects of the character that really divides the fan base. One detail that I feel like is really obvious in the background, but I feel like has a little bit more there, is the fact that she's surrounded by plants. We do know that it's almost like a hallmark to her to hold flowers, hold plants when she's about to, you know, pass away. We see this artwork a lot when it comes to Himeno as a character. But if you look at the shape of the leaf itself, it could also be seen as a tobacco leaf, and tobacco and cigarettes is a huge component of her character relationship, especially with Aki. You can really read cigarettes to be the life of a public safety employee within the world of Chainsaw Man. Oftentimes people are very motivated, fired up, and are burning with energy because they are so motivated by getting revenge, getting a stable paycheck, doing things to help the public good, but also it will eventually fizzle out and you will be left just with ashes. And I think this metaphor with cigarettes, tobacco, and Aki and Himeno's relationship is actually very interesting with the detail of the leaves behind her. So I don't know, I think eventually Himeno's cigarette did fizzle out, and I don't know, it's one of my favorite covers because of all the details with Himeno. I know she's not a super popular character. Himeno can be read as a great metaphor of adults who don't have a healthy support system, so I think the detail of a tobacco leaf behind her is a really subtle one that I personally really like to see. Maybe some of you don't see it. Personally, I think it's a great nod, but let me know what you guys think. Ooh, Volume 4. Okay, Volume 4 honestly is one of my favorites as well because of the fact that Aki's death within Chainsawman is one of the most obvious things within the series. Fujimoto tries no effort in trying to hide it. He actually wants his viewers to know that Aki's probably not going to survive till the end of the series, but doing things like this where you have Aki kind of wiping blood off of his cheek as he is like standing in front of a firing range target, I think just goes to show how much Aki's death is telegraphed, but we are still so invested in his career. And we even see that within this volume 2, where Aki decides to make a new contract with the Future Devil, and the Future Devil's like, I'll work with you for free because I want to see how you die. I think one of the best things about this volume cover as well is the way that Aki's hair contrasts with the background of the target along with the blood, and I think it just goes to show that a lot of the style choices within Chainsaw Man are great because of how it bounces off of each other. Wearing suits, wearing professional clothing, in and of itself, maybe not as exciting compared to most anime, but it's the way it's used in scenarios like this of the contrast of a very put together person, but covered in blood and in a firing range is what makes Chainsaw Man have this charm about it. What makes Volume 5 very interesting to me is the fact that this is a action shot and one of the few action shots we ever get as a volume cover, and it's actually ripped directly from chapter 36 in this volume. It's the moment when Katana Man jumps Chainsaw Man or Denji, and they are now falling off of a building, and they're surrounded by streamers of blood. One of the things you'll notice, especially with this volume cover in particular, which will be a pattern up until a certain point, which don't worry, just hold on to this for a minute, I'll bring it up later, is notice how vivid these volume covers are. They're really striking, and I think on some level it is for marketing. Obviously, we need to make sure people are buying volume covers, but I also think to say that color theory isn't something that has a meticulous art-based choice is just wrong, especially knowing Fujimoto. The way these volume covers really use color to convey a certain feeling or emotion, like Power's very pink color, I think is such a great detail on showing kind of like, you know, she is probably one of the biggest female faces of the series besides maybe someone like Makima. Contrast with Himeno's more green, kind of earthy, kind of insinuating that she might be buried sometime soon, with Aki's more blue and red kind of vivid back and forth. All of these colors are not by accident, and I think the colorfulness of this one is gonna come up later, but hold on to it for now. This next volume cover, I don't even know if I'm allowed to show on YouTube, but you know what? Who knows? Maybe it will be here, maybe it won't. Let's see what I decide to do in editing. And that is Volume 6, which is the Rise arc, also known as the Bomb Girl Devil arc. And honestly, I actually really like this cover. We'll ignore the naked Rise after, but I do think we do need to talk about something called directioning, which is a pretty common thing within film. I know a lot of people know this, but if you don't know, Fujimoto is a cinephile. He is a huge movie fan, especially American movies. And if you buy the volumes of Chainsaw Man, you'll oftentimes see Fujimoto say like, I love blank movie. Like he said, I love Nope, which is a pretty recent movie. I love Chainsaw Massacre, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff. So he even mentioned Star Wars in Fire Punch. Fujimoto also has scenes of, in almost all of his work, of characters going to a movie theater. So I think Fujimoto being inspired by American Hollywood tropes and designs actually makes a lot of sense, and we can see that perfectly on this cover. Within storytelling, oftentimes a character looking to the left is not a good thing. It's oftentimes a symbol of regression. The character isn't growing. Maybe they're backtracking. Maybe the natural progress of things is falling behind. Versus a character looking to the right is oftentimes a symbol of looking ahead, looking forward. And I don't think it's a mistake that the character of Denji is the one looking right while Rise is looking to the left. For Denji, he's looking to the right as he's looking ahead. He's trying to now understand that maybe there is a world outside of Makima. Can he feel attraction for people beyond just Makima? Does he really experience attraction for Makima? Like, who is he attracted to? He's asking a lot of these questions that, because of his very small worldview, he was never allowed or even knew he wanted to ask himself. Versus with Rise, because of the confines of her role as the bomb hybrid and her mission to take down the like Chainsaw Devil, she is oftentimes confiding and conflicting with a lot of different emotions. And I also think her looking back, which sorry, all I can think about now is look back, but her looking back is also a pretty good nod at the fact that she is not going to be in the story for too long. I mean, we do see her in other volumes after this, but that's not really Rose. It's a weird mind-controlled version of her that Makima has put under a contract or weird hypnosis, whatever Makima's up to. So I think that nod of having them look in those separate directions was a great idea. Obviously, when you talk about the naked photo of Rose on the cover, which also is a nod to the pool scene, which we are also going to be seeing in the movie theaters this October. But I think the decision to have Rose naked on the cover is probably a threefold thing. First is the literal pull of wanting to have her on the cover like this, which is the nod to the pool scene, which is one of the cutest scenes between her and Denji. Before things start to fall apart. Second is the fact that now Denji is seeing a side to her that he's never seen in a lot of women in his life. So he's seeing her in a way that's like the most vulnerable he has been with another person. And then third is her own emotional vulnerability. It's always a complicated question of, did Rose truly have feelings for Denji, or was it purely an operation? And I think on some level it was a little bit of the two. I think Rose did like Denji at the end of the day, but I think at first a lot of it was her acting and her trying to put up a facade to make him lower his guard. But I think she was so good at it that it almost felt like there was a little bit of truth in her behavior. They always say that in every accusation there is a confession, and I think her behavior is a perfect representation of that quote. And her being naked on the cover is kind of us seeing her in a way that she's now self-examining of like, shoot, maybe I also am vulnerable because I truly have feelings for Denji. It's a cool cover, and let's go on to the next one. Ooh, okay, volume number 7, my personal favorite volume cover in all of Chainsawman because it covers the International Assassins arc, and obviously this cover is great for the fact that it really shows the grand nature of the International Assassins arc. We have people from all over the world arriving to Japan to take down Denji, and I think the volume cover truly captures what that means. This is also the first Chainsawman volume where we actually see Denji in his human form, and I don't think that's an accident. This arc also really asks Denji to kind of question some of the things that he has come to understand when it comes to the role of public safety after the events of the Rose arc. You know, now Rose telegraphed where the Chainsaw Devil is, and everyone wants to go to Japan to take him down. We also see a lot of characters like Aldo's older brother, Santa Claus, the Doll Master, and Quan Chi, with Denji being covered in chains made out of intestines. I think obviously the intestine chains are supposed to represent the confines of being a part of the Public Safety Commission, and the fact that Denji had almost all of his movements monitored because of the events of the last volume. Having the intestines be a separating indicator of the different characters on the volume cover is a great Fujimoto style of paneling. Fujimoto is great at making panels look like they are a lot more immersive, having things be broken up in a way that's very creative, like whether it's like a window or using the Darkness Devil's arms, which I feel like is actually one of the biggest things I don't like about the next volume cover, which we can just hop straight there, and that is volume 8. The cover itself is actually not too bad. This is also our first volume where we ever get to meet a primal fear, and that is the Darkness Devil when our characters go to hell. I personally would have loved a detail in the background where behind Quan Chi and Denji, we see a lot of the doors that make up hell, or some subtle nod to the fact that this volume has a lot more world building in it compared to the other volumes. But it is a great volume cover at the end of the day. I do think it captures kind of the back and forth between Denji and Quan Chi's ideology pretty well. Quan Chi is a big believer in this idea that ignorance is truly bliss, that especially for someone who's been as long in the world as she has, being known as the first devil hunter, there's been a lot of times where she has probably had to turn her mind off a little bit to kind of get a job done and rather just not know something if that's the best way to live. I mean, she's had a long life, and I don't blame her for having this mindset. Compare that to Denji, who's trying to figure out what does it mean to be good, what does it mean to be a normal person, and especially with this role as Chainsawman and working in the public safety and trying to impress Makima, he oftentimes resorts to a lot more escapism. Escapism isn't like ignorance is bliss because you know what you're hiding from, versus with Quan Chi, she'd rather just not know at all. And I think this cover does a pretty decent job of trying to convey that kind of synergy between their beliefs and stuff, because they're not fighting each other compared to the action shot of Katana Man and Denji. But overall, I like this one. I do wish there was a little hint at the Hell sequence, maybe the Darkness Devil within this, but I think focusing on Quan Chi and Denji's back and forth is not a bad idea either. Volume 9, probably one of the most infamous volume covers within the series because of how painful it is. Volume 9 is the reason why I wanted you guys to remember how colorful Volume 5 was, and how colorful, honestly, a lot of the ones are. You'll notice that throughout all the volume covers that there's very vivid color imagery. There's a lot going on, there's action shots, there's even a little bit of eroticism in some of these volume covers, but Volume 9 is using the color blue in a way that's really, really chilling, and no pun intended with the fact that, you know, we see Child Aki being the only character smiling on this cover too, holding a snowball. I also like the background given the fact that it almost looks like a ocean, like a cold ocean and stuff, and I think being cold at the beach is one of those feelings that you don't really know how to describe. You can't really mimic it naturally elsewhere in your everyday. I think that background with the fact that, you know, Aki and Angel learn a lot about the truth of who they are, their circumstances, and their relationship with Makima at the beach. I also love the fact that Aki is not looking at the reader. He's looking forward, almost like there's a light hitting his face as he's ready to pass on and stuff. And then Angel is kind of looking back, kind of like shocked, like something caught his attention, which I also think is a great detail given the fact that we now see Angel's backstory and how Makima kind of ruined his life. Like, really just ruined it all for everyone. I think this cover also really does a great job of marking the point now that the story has entered an era of no return. A lot happens within Volume 9. Aki dies, Angel dies. We get the truth about Makima being the control devil. We see the first ever instance of the gun devil, and there is just a lot to take in this volume, and I think a cover like this does a great job of representing kind of a freezing halt, you could say, of the story, and it's kind of more grand, adventurous feeling in a more human struggle of trying to be understood and having a motivation. Arguably one of the best volume covers within Chainsaw Man, period, and I think it's a great one. Volume 10 I'm actually going to combine with Volume 18 because they're both about the control devil and actually have a lot more in common than you may think. Volume 10 is a very suffocating cover. I love the detail of the sides of Makima being the actual door frame of when Power opened the door. But behind Makima is a really bright red, almost like eye-catchingly like strong red behind her. And you would think the red from her hair and the red in the background would clash, but it actually creates a very beautiful silhouette as we see Makima point with her one finger, which allows her to kill people with her bang ability. Compare that to Volume 18, where it's Nayuta and it's wide open, compared to Volume 10's more suffocating style. Volume 18 is very airy. You feel like almost you are taking a photo of Nayuta as you guys went out to the countryside, while with Volume 10, it almost like Makima caught you by surprise when you open that door. Comparing the 18 color background, which is a more softer cranberry red, versus the 10 volume cover where the red is harsh and almost hurts your eyes to look at it for too long, it creates a very different tone. And I love that 18's cover has Nayuta holding up a peace sign, almost like she's saying goodbye, maybe she's posing for a photo. And the two fingers compared to Makima's one finger is a contrast of the fact that one finger for the control devil is a form of violence, but two is a sign of peace. I don't know, I've always loved the relationship between Volume 10 and Volume 18. It's always been one of my favorites, and I always liked that Volume 18 showed a little bit more of a quieter scene within Chainsaw Man. If you look at a lot of the Part 1 covers, Part 2's covers kind of have a lot of a softer ambience to them, which I actually feel like is very interesting. Part 2 definitely does have more quieter moments, but I do think the story of Chainsaw Man, both Part 1 and Part 2, is no stranger to quieter, more intimate moments. But 18, and especially all of Part 2, tends to put that a little bit more in the front covers than we see Part 1 does. Part 1 is trying to show you more action shots, more of a dynamic scene, while part 2 is more about the more somber, quieter moments. So that's both volume 10 and volume 18. And now a great way to end part 1 is volume 11. Volume 11 is actually probably one of the most disliked volume covers because of how Denji is drawn, and I don't blame people. He kind of looks a little bit frumpy, I'm not gonna lie. I also think the choice of the almost bathroom tile is not my favorite design. I will say though, Denji's decision to wear a jacket, like a suit jacket, I actually think is kind of a callback to Aki. We also have in this volume the conversation between Denji and Kishibe where he kind of talks about his master plan and the defeat of Makima. And it's a pretty common fan theory, but it's so commonly said that it almost feels canon at this point that Denji was actually wearing Aki's suit to mask his scent. I don't really know how that would work because Aki is dead at this point, and Makima may have picked it up during her final fight if she smelled Aki. Or maybe it had no scent to it, who knows. Maybe it was something in his wardrobe that Denji decided to take and stuff in honor of Aki, given the fact that he used Power's blood to create the chainsaw. I do think that adds a little bit more detail to this volume cover that personally I feel like is not super popular. But I also do feel like there's a little bit of charm in the fact that Denji looks a little bit awkward in this cover. You know, Denji in other covers is either being badass, he is in imprisonment. Here we kind of just see Denji in his raw. He's just kind of like this awkward kid, frankly, who just ended his journey of the public safety arc of Chainsawman, which is known as Chainsawman Part 1. So maybe this more awkward drawing is a little bit on purpose. Maybe it's Denji can finally rest. He's not putting on a facade of heroism, of being imprisoned. It is just Denji being Denji. And with that, we are now concluded with part 1. Let us start with part 2, which is volume 12. Volume 12 starts strong with the fact that I really like this volume cover too. I always feel like I'm a sucker for the way Yoru is drawn. I love her scar. I also love the detail in this one where it almost feels like she is drawing the scar on herself. Like you see her wiping away some blood, almost like she dragged the line herself. Obviously, that's not how she got her scar. But if you look at a lot of the perspective, we see the same red background that we saw with Makima, but instead of looking head on, it's almost drawn because of the buildings surrounding Yoru, that the buildings and where we are positioned is almost like we are like on the floor looking up at Yoru, which could have been a nod to maybe a perspective that Asa saw the moment she kind of unwillingly made this contract with Yoru when Yoru took over her body. I think it also does a great job of contrasting part 1's first volume, where it's an action shot of Denji emerging from a state of fighting zombie devils, while this one is quieter. It is just kind of Yoru posing and being born in a more kind of subtle way and stuff. We still don't really know the context of why Yoru was able to just take over Asa's body without a formal contract and stuff, and their hybrid weird dual status is still something that's a little bit confusing, but I really like this one, and I love kind of the look she gives the reader and stuff. It really does mark the new story of part 2, so I personally like this one. Volume 13 is a very weird cover given the fact that the background is drawn upside down. I also think the character choice of having Yuko is one that's also really interesting to me. Out of all the volume covers, for the most part, the characters on the volume covers are ones that have a huge impact on the story or really kind of define a character's momentum or a character's relationship with other people. I think obviously with the International Assassins arc having so many different characters on it was obviously the right thing to do to kind of showcase the story of this arc. I think having Yuko on the cover was a choice just solo. But I would have expected something like Asa and Yuko, but I think the decision to have the background be upside down was obviously a nod to the fact that Yuko dies in this volume and she's hanging upside down from fake Chainsaw Man. I also like that the plant behind her looks almost like death lilies, which obviously are spider lilies, which are also a pretty well-known anime trope to appear whenever a character is going to die. Also, you'll notice the shadow that kind of divides Yuko. Shadow imagery is actually one of the most common forms of imagery we saw with Yuko's character. And you will see this a lot in the way that the panels are drawn with Yuko, and especially with Asa when she confesses that she killed her neighbor. And that is the fact that shadows are oftentimes a way, and sunlight, of kind of displaying information or a character realizing something, like something dawned on them, like a shadow was casted over them, that almost without a shadow of a doubt that they realized the true intention of a character. We saw that with Asa and Yuko, and we're seeing it now with the volume cover. So pretty interesting cover at the end of the day. Let me know what you guys think of this one. I feel like Yuko has a lot of fans. And I do wish we saw more of her, because I just want more female characters to interact with Asa. I feel like Asa needs more female characters to bounce off of. Though I don't mind the whole Yoshida, now Death Devil, Denji, Asa friend group that was kind of like Fumiko group that was kind of emerging. It was not my favorite, honestly, but it does give Asa more people to bounce off of besides Yoru. So, I don't know. I feel like I wish there was a little bit more Yuko in the story. Volume 14, I feel like I keep saying a lot of these are my favorite. This one is actually also one of my favorites, because this, in context of the plot twist that happened much later in the series, makes this one feel so much better. This is now our third Horseman volume cover, and we're now just waiting for one more with Fami, the real Fami. But the Death Devil cover is one of the best, in my opinion. The way it uses lighting, the way it uses color, it's all so great. We see the Death Devil kind of looking at the reader with a head tilt, which obviously a lot of the head tilt imagery is almost like she's trying to keep her head up as if she's on a noose, which is a crazy visual. We also see her holding a hat, and she's holding it close to her chest, which is a very customary practice whenever someone has passed away, or showing respect in a non-verbal cue, especially when it comes to grief or going to a funeral or things like that, or giving your condolences to someone. I also love the backlit imagery of the cathedral showcasing Death Devil's role within the Chainsawman church, and we also see her earrings almost representing scales in which she's judging someone for the afterlife, which is we see a lot in Egyptian mythology. I also like that the backlit cathedral look is almost very kind of personal. It's almost like she pulled you aside, almost like she has to confess something to you. And I feel like, looking back, there was probably a lot of signs that this was the Death Devil, but I don't know. I feel like this has so much charm looking back at it after the plot twist that I really, really love this volume cover. I also think the purple color is so great at kind of capturing a lot of the royalty feeling of the Death Devil being the #1 devil. It is the most feared devil in all of Chainsawman, in even human society as we understand it, because the fear of death transcends almost anything else. So, I don't know, I just love this volume cover a lot, and I think it's a great one. Volume 15 is now our first primal fear, if you're not counting a horseman on a cover, and that is the Falling Devil. The Falling Devil, who obviously looks like a chef, kind of makes the background of the moon, which is a blood moon, look kind of like a pizza, but also maybe like some roti, maybe a tortilla. But I feel like that use of the moon, also kind of looking like food, is also a great nod at her abilities. The Falling Devil, who represents the fear of heights, the fear of falling, but also falling in a metaphorical way, whether it is falling in a depression or anxiety or any form of episodic kind of mental health trigger, I think is really greatly showcased through the moon. You know, the moon is a great spiritual symbol for a lot of cultures, but also the moon in a gravitational sense, you know, dictates our gravitational force with the ocean tides. And we know that the Falling Devil has the ability to influence gravity and had a gravitational impact with her just appearing in this volume. And it was a great consequence of her arriving. I also think the multiple hands kind of holding up the head is a great design choice as well. It kind of goes to show almost raising her up to the sky as someone that should be worshipped. Obviously, she works for the Death Devil, and the little flowers in the background kind of all tie it all together, almost like a garnish amongst this volume cover, which obviously is a great cooking motif. So I like this one a lot, and I think the color choice as well is really striking. I think the chef hat too. And it's very clear that he ended up really liking this design for the Falling Devil, because it was supposed to be some random chick's head, but she kind of stuck around. So, yeah. Volume 16 is a very unexpected cover choice of Mirisugo, who is also a weapon hybrid. We see him standing there with a very fancy looking blade, and in the background is butterflies. I actually was kind of intrigued by this choice, but it kind of makes sense as Miri as a character. Butterflies are extremely fragile and obviously go through a cocoon state. I think this obviously is a reference to Miri's relationship with Makima, compared to someone like Barum, who had a deep love and affection for Makima beyond just her brainwashing of the weapon hybrids. Miri actually is very grateful for Denji. Denji essentially freed him from his emotional and mental slavery to Makima. He went through his own cocoon of becoming his personhood after the events of part 1 in the series. And I think having butterflies represent that is really great imagery. You also see 4-leaf clovers in the background. I think this idea points to a better future for Miri as a character. Obviously right now in the story he's under custody, so not that great as of right now. I do think that this choice of having more of a naturey kind of almost Celtic design of a background makes a lot of sense given the fact that he is a longsword devil. Longswords are very common in medieval Europe and actually was their originating point, and I think having a more Celtic European design as the background is a great nod to his origins as a weapon hybrid, as someone who may have some connection given the fact that weapon hybrids are quite old in age. So great detail cover all around, so I really like this cover. Volume 17 is a interesting one given the fact that for a lot of people who first see it, they kind of do a double take and they're like, wait, this isn't young Kishibe. The resemblance is striking, and it's kind of crazy that this was a design choice, but I actually think it makes sense given who Yoshida is as a person. His contract with the Octopus Devil definitely makes him more of a shiftier person. He oftentimes camouflages his true beliefs or camouflages kind of his intentions or his kind of, even now in volume covers, his design. He almost looks like someone that is pretty nostalgic for us as a community, and I don't think that's by accident. The lime green background is also a choice. Personally, for me, I don't really get it. Maybe there's something you guys see. This alleyway scene also could be a nod back to part 1, where we kind of see one of Yoshida's more iconic moments when he had the interaction with Aldo in the hallway. But I do think this design choice of making him look like young Kishibe is definitely one of the ones that stands out and honestly carries this volume cover. Pose of being more relaxed is actually in direct contrast of his actual actions in this volume. He is actually actively ruining people's life and removes Asa's arm. So the more nonchalant cover masking his true intention in the volume cover and his role in honestly this story up this far of part 2 kind of makes some sense. Personally for me, not the biggest fan of this one, but it's alright. Quick intermission from our sponsor today, which is me. We don't have a sponsor, but I did want to say in the description, you're going to be able to find my TikTok, my Instagram, and my Discord. So if you want to engage with me on other platforms, that's a great way to check me out on Instagram, where I kind of post some of my TikTok content if you don't have TikTok. But also, we don't know if TikTok is going to get banned. Discord is also a great way to talk to me more directly. I try my best. TikTok DMs for me are a little bit chaotic. But also Instagram, you can check out my personal Instagram if you want to see any of the side quests, fit pics I got. So yeah, just wanted to say that, and let's just finish up with the last 2 volumes. Volume 19 features Fumiko, and it's a very interesting volume cover given the fact that it was a very unexpected character to get a volume cover. But on top of that, it's the very like horticulture kind of garden tapestry vibe that you wouldn't really associate with someone like Fumiko. She's a very brash character, very curt, and to have more of a naturey kind of, tapestry design for a cover, it's actually quite beautiful, I am not going to lie. I also think the comedically large chair, as she kind of gives you a side glance throwing up the peace sign, I think is also a neat detail. The peace sign could also be actually not a peace sign and instead the number 2, which the number 2 obviously referencing the fact that there were 2 Fumikos that kind of just showed up because of her devil contract that we never really got an answer to as of now. But I like the sun kind of backdrop and stuff. There's not too much. I think the tapestry there is just more to kind of create a silhouette and sense of dimension within it. It definitely feels the most immersive of the covers, given the fact that it almost feels like you're walking into a space and you can see it very dimensionally. But Yeah, I would say there's not too much on this cover design wise when it comes to the symbolism or analysis, but I do think the two her holding up the two sign, or maybe it is a peace sign, saying peace out to her other version of herself. And last but not least, we have volume 20, which is our first cover of Asa. It only took 8 volumes for us to finally see Asa on a cover of Chainsawman Part 2, the main character, but I actually love this cover a lot. It's very quiet. A lot of people have compared this to the volume cover of Aki, Angel, and Young Aki, where it does feel like when we see very like vivid blues like this one, it does kind of give you that feeling of, are we entering a point of the story of no return? We do know this is the part of the story that is after the aging devil and kind of a little bit of the arc we're currently in right now with the death devil and the twist about kind of if Yoru and Denji will get together, if Denji's able to kill the death devil and stuff, or instead will Yoru just end up killing Denji. We also know Asa has the insider knowledge of Yoru's master plan, but she does not tell the readers nor Denji about it, which is a little bit frustrating. But let's get back to the cover. The cover is Asa looking kind of not even at the audience, but looking a little bit past you, like she sees you but she's not really looking at you. The dark blues and honestly the light you see from the city is really nice. Some people interpret it as fire. I don't really see it as fire. Obviously fire could be a symbol here given the fact that the fire devil is a huge part of Chainsaw Man Part 2, but I kind of see it of the city lights of kind of representing the life that Asa used to have, the life of Asa before Yoru was involved. We don't know too much about that life, at least the in-between after she left the orphanage and before the events of Yoru taking over her body. But I think this kind of looking back at us and feeling a sense of emptiness. It shows her one visible arm, that the other arm that she lost. I don't know. I think it's a great cover. It's very somber in nature, and I think it does just kind of show the type of person Asa is. I know a lot of people like to joke that Asa's a femcel and stuff, but I think in her core, Asa's a very sad character, a very tragic character who gets roped up into a lot of things. And I think this really does a great job of conveying her isolation and loneliness as a character, because she doesn't have that dynamic friendship between Denji and Pochita like she does with Yoru. Yoru is actively ruining her life and stuff. In the latest chapter that we got, I believe it was 206, we actually see Asa defy Yoru and chase after Denji after the Falling Devil punishes him for attacking her. I don't know, maybe we'll start to see an Asa, maybe turn and look back to the city lights and actually try to capture some of that life that she used to have. I also think the idea of having a window pane be the one that kind of divides the city versus Asa, and comparing it to maybe possibility of using a balcony, is the fact that she is able to see but she can't go through the life that she wants. And I do like the idea of having that window and not like a balcony or an open space that actually divides Asa from the life that she kind of wants. Because if the lights are on, people are home, it's community, something that Asa has always wanted, something that she's always lacked. So yeah. Are some errors in this, maybe it's not that interesting, maybe it was too long, maybe it was too short. Please give me feedback. There's no such thing as bad feedback, so let me know in the comments anything I can improve on, anything you guys don't like, do like, because that would be super helpful for me. And yeah, but let me know what you guys think. Also check me out on other platforms and comment any video ideas you may have in the future. But that is everything for me. My name is Ishan. Thank you again so much for watching.